Ava. The whole bridge stood in stunned silence as the words rang out. What were we going to say? The moment that this admiral knew who Alex was, he would be taken and sentenced to death. Alex had made that much clear to the captain, and I since the Terran's secret came out. Despite the size difference, I could see Alex start to sweat and shift around in my hand. It was clear to me that he felt the same. "He is a member of my crew under the GC Fair Trade Agreement with United Terra," replied the captain in her best diplomat's voice. "Any further information given would require a formal request via the proper channels, Admiral." The Admiral leaned back in his chair, narrowing his eyes, either impressed by the legal obstacle course thrown in his path or irritated at the minor setback. He motioned to someone off camera, most likely one of the bridge crew. "I don't remember asking you, Captain. I'm sure that the man can speak for himself, as he so clearly butted into this official communication. And furthermore, why the fuck aren't you in your suit?" Alex looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, but he opened his mouth instead. "Well, I thought that with the secret coming out, and the assault on the strength through diplomacy, that it didn't matter anymore," he said uncertainly, his voice not projecting nearly as much as he usually did to speak to me. The Admiral's eyes widened as he heard Alex speak, and his mouth drew down in a scowl. My heart dropped into my stomach as he opened his mouth. "You!" he snarled with the malice of a person who would call down an orbital strike on a highly populated area just to see the casualty number rise. Alex looked like he was about to pass out. "I was wondering when you were going to put 2 and 2 together," he said in a small voice.
Admiral Elin Chaplin. "That's it. Forget the fucking trial. Straight to the firing squad with this one. This fucking idiot of a human being didn't even deserve rights at this point, especially after the hell that his actions put every citizen of United Terra over the last 3 days. It was because of him that humanity's foreign policy is going to be an absolute mess for God knows how many years. It was because of him that the First Sol Defense Fleet was dragged out here. It was because of him that the strength through diplomacy was attacked. The whole reason that we were in the first war with aliens that we've ever had. And the fact that this bastard had the audacity to see how long it takes for me to figure out who he was, that was crossing a line. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice as calm and measured as I could. "Alex Davis, under United Terra's First Contact Article 7, Section 13B, I hereby place you under arrest for conspiracy to reveal classified materials and the subsequent revelation of classified materials. The Traitor's Bane will be docking in 5 minutes. Prepare to be boarded." "Now hold on 1 minute," shouted the captain as she waved her tentacles around wildly. "Alex is a part of my crew and is subject to extradition laws of the GC. You can't just march onto my ship and demand that I give up my crew," she shouted. As she talked, some of the crew on her end were even mumbling agreements with each other. I had to act fast, crush this while I could, otherwise I might have to storm the shooting star for the damn man. We didn't need any more bloodshed, not after today. I took in a sharp breath of air. "I'm sorry to burst your bubble, Captain, but the request for the extradition of Alex Davis was filed the moment that we had confirmation of this fiasco, and it just came back this morning. Your hands are tied, Captain." "Well, I have seen nothing of the sort from the GC," she shouted, still fighting to keep Alex on board. I pinched my nose. Why is she fighting so hard to keep him there? I'm getting rid of a problem for her. She should be thanking me, not shouting me down for this. "Senator Venus has informed me that your side of the paperwork came in about half an hour ago. You can be forgiven for not checking your email during the fireworks show that you could probably see from the relative safety of your ship." I didn't try to hold back my contempt this time. I wasn't very good at reading alien body language. That was never a part of my job description, but I could tell that the captain was frustrated to say the least as she scooped up a tablet and read through the order. The alien holding Alex up to the camera, a Koshole, if I remembered my kaijus correctly, turned to the captain, and with desperation in her voice said, "Captain, are we really doing this?" The captain gave a flick of her tentacle. "Our hands are tied, Ava." It sounded like there was genuine remorse in her voice. "Get him prepped for the transfer and keep him company in his cabin, and I don't want any funny business from either of you." After saying that, the captain turned back to the camera. "We await further instructions, before terminating the call. I sighed and closed my eyes. Remind the traitor's Bane knows that they need to scrub wherever he's been living of any traces of Terran tech. The last thing we need is Terran tech getting out into the wild. Now we'll see if this bastard will come willingly. Alex. All things considered, that went a lot better than I was expecting, I said aloud the moment that the call had been dropped. I mean, he could have just said blow up the ship and be done with it. You're being arrested, and this is the thing you're concerned about? Said Ava, without waiting for anyone else to respond. It's called gallows humor. I know that I'm going to die, might as well make a show out of it, I explained with a shrug. She was silent for a time, with nothing but the rhythmic tapping of her clawed feet on the metal flooring. I feel like I've asked this question to you a lot, but if it didn't keep happening, I wouldn't keep asking it. Ask away, I said. After all, this might be the last time that we ever see each other. Are all Terrans like you? She asked. What? Do you mean like in terms of humor? I asked back. She nodded. Well, in that case, yes. While there are people that don't seem to like that kind of humor, they are outweighed by those that do. Silence fell once more as we got closer and closer to my cabin. It wasn't long before we stood in front of the door. I looked up at Ava. Well, this is it, isn't it? Might as well hurry up and wait around, she nodded. That's certainly one way to put it, she said, a tremble in her voice as she slid open the door. It was strange, going back in there after everything that had happened. I lived here for 3 months, hiding from the rest of the crew and the rest of the galaxy, if I'm being honest. The detritus and proof of me living in this place was evident to see, and one thing was clear to me. It's going to be one hell of a cleanup job for whatever poor son of a bitch is going to be responsible for this. We sat there for a few minutes just enjoying each other's company and waiting. It wasn't long before there was a knock on the door, one that I immediately recognized as the armored fist of a mech. The door was opened, and in stepped 2 hulking military mechs. They seemed to stop and regard me with cold mechanical eyes as my own drifted down to their bolters, no doubt ready to gun down any resistance. It was only a moment later when one of them finally spoke, the speaker no doubt wearing a sneer that I couldn't see. So you're the fucker that caused this shitstorm. Those words cut through me like a knife through some hot butter. Even if the 40-ton war machine wasn't looking down at me on the desk like some particularly irritating mouse, it would still have been extremely intimidating. It took just about all of my willpower to not flee. I was going to die anyways. Might as well make a show out of it. I looked over to Ava, who gave me the slightest shake of her head. I gave a brief sigh before I looked back over to the 2 soldiers in their mechs and gave a shrug. Yeah, there aren't any other humans on this ship, is there? One turned to the other. Looks like we have a comedian on our hands here. Oh yeah, it's going to be real entertaining watching the funny guy crack during the trial, said the other one, pulling a temporary holding cell and placing it in front of me on the table. Get in! I looked back over to Ava, who looked just about ready to jump one of the soldiers. Instead, she gave me a small wave and said, I'll see you on the other side. If this isn't the end of the line for me, then I will be genuinely surprised, I whispered as I stepped into the holding cell. It was a sparse thing, clearly made for temporary transportation of prisoners more than any kind of comfort at all. There were no windows, just a single harsh LED in the center of the ceiling, a metal chair bolted to the floor, and a small camera mounted in the back left corner of the cell. No sooner than I walked in, it shut with a harsh metal squeal behind me. With nothing better to do, I walked over to the chair and sat down. It became necessary to hold on to the chair as the cell was roughly lifted off the table and into the air. What do you think will happen to him? What are Terran courts even like? I heard Ava ask worriedly. If he's lucky, he'll spend the rest of his life in a prison cell, one of the soldiers. But personally, supplied the other, we're hoping for the death penalty. This was going to be a long next few days. Admiral Chaplin. Package secured, returning to ship. There was a small amount of tension that left my body as I heard those words. I turned over to the projection of Admiral Villa. He was hunched over his own projection of what the former battlefield looked like. The debris of the last 45 minutes would take weeks to clear up, especially with how much wreckage the Yalean ships had created in the battle. I turned back to my own readouts. Alex has been detained, and he's en route back to us as we speak. Admiral Villa gave me a curt nod at that. Should have him in front of a council before the end of the day. The strength through diplomacy is in no state to move, Villa explained, and our long-range comms are still out. If this is going to be with Terran High Command, it'll have to be on the fuck around and find out. I nodded, transfixed by the holographic display of one of the Yalean's ship's reactors going critical. The explosion was only supplemented by the half-dozen radioactivity warnings that popped up around the affected area. I watched as the rest of the fleet compensated to not get hit by the majority of the shrapnel that was once an enemy ship. "How long do you think it'll be before she's able to be back up and running?" I asked. Admiral Villa gave a dry chuckle. "With all this readily available scrap to choose from? 2 months at least. One if you can convince High Command to send a large enough autofab. That's 1 to 2 months of the fleet not in the Sol system. I don't like leaving it open like that. What if someone finds it?" Admiral Villa gave me a look that I knew well. "You worry far too much. So long as you were following protocol, Sol should be fine." I looked back over to the live readout that I was receiving from the Sol system. Everything looked green, but with no way to detect faster than light travel, it would be impossible to tell if an invasion fleet was headed for the Sol system. "I'll see what I can do to get an autofab out here, but I can't make any promises," I said, turning away from the readout. "And besides, since the prisoner is going to be brought here, I want to make sure that he gets a proper welcome." Admiral Villa gave me a look. "Take your time. Just remember, if he dies before a trial, there's going to be a whole inquiry about what happened to him." I cracked a smile. "We'll just have to make sure that he makes it then." Alex. The box I was in was rattling like a poorly tuned engine as I tried desperately to stop myself from tumbling from the chair. If I didn't know any better, I would have bet money on those 2 soldiers shaking the holding cell just for the hell of it. If I hadn't had extensive training getting my mech license, I probably would have been a lot more motion sick than I was right now. All of a sudden, the box stopped shaking. I must have been put down. Probably even on their ship. What did they call it? The Traitor's Bane? Awfully appropriate, considering what kind of charges they were going to throw at me. I took a deep breath. Keep calm, and this will all be over soon enough, one way or another. I sat there in silence for a space of time. It could have been minutes or hours, I couldn't tell. Boredom was starting to creep in as I started to bounce my knee. It was growing incessantly, quickly evolving into me tapping out a beat onto the sides of the chair. The tapping evolved into pacing, which then evolved into me, sitting in the corners of the rooms, the cold metal making it uncomfortable for me to sit for more than a few minutes. I occasionally looked over to the camera in the corner I knew I was being watched from. "If this is your way of getting back at me before the trial, this is considered cruel and unusual, and my lawyer will be hearing about this," I shouted to no one in particular. I waited for some time before I finally gave up at getting a response, so I quickly went back to my pacing. I blinked in surprise as the wall that I had entered suddenly opened, and there was an entire retinue of guards waiting for me to step out of the cell. Here we go again. Admiral Elin Chaplin. The cacophony of noise was a welcome distraction from the last 40 minutes of waiting for the prisoner to arrive on the ship. I looked around at the veritable beehive of activity in this massive hangar, from lowly techs scurrying about the place in search of something to repair or maintain, to the supply crates the size of large homes being pushed by even larger mechs. Every once in a while, one of the people going about their business noticed me and my security team and gave me a small salute. I would nod and give a small salute back, but that happened infrequently enough that it came as a bit of a surprise every single time. Eventually, the lights surrounding one of the massive airlocks flashed, indicating that there was a ship docked and passengers ready to disembark. As it cycled and the massive doors slid open, I saw a small retinue of soldiers all stood in a circle formation around a man in a garishly orange jumpsuit. The only one that was out of this formation, the captain of the Traitor's Bane himself, one Captain Holm. He was a short man with a powerful build that commanded the respect and attention of those around him. His permanent scowl softened for a moment as he saw me and gave me a crisp salute. "One prisoner, mostly unharmed, as requested, sir," he said swiftly. I returned the salute. "Excellent job. We'll take it from here." Captain Holm gave a curt nod and turned to walk back to the airlock. My security took this as a sign to surround the prisoner and corral him closer to me. I gave my best sinister smile. "Welcome to the fuck around and find out. You fucked around, it's time for you to find out."